Hi, and welcome to Chatty AF, the Anime Feminist podcast. We are wrapping up fall of 2023. I almost said winter of 2023 because it is now winter. We've got so much stuff to talk about, so we're just going to blast through it. I'm Caitlin. I'm the community manager at Anime Feminist. I also write reviews for Anime News Network. I also edit from time to time when I have the time, which unfortunately is not very much recently. And today I am joined by Toni and Peter.
Hi, I'm Toni. I'm an editor at NFM. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and other social platforms at poetpedagogue.
And I'm Peter Fobian. I'm a YouTube strategy and content at Crunchyroll, and I'm an editor here at Anime Feminist. I'm at Peter Fobian on Blue Sky now.
All right, so we've got so much to talk about because there's a lot of shows this season, and all of us watched a lot with not actually a ton of overlap. So there will be some monologuing, but we're going to try to keep it short today, right, guys?
Yes,
Gender neutral guys.
Doing our best.
So I just want to do a quick check-in. We usually skip over Pit of Shame, but I do want to mention A Girl and Her Guard Dog. You know, it ended exactly the way you think it would. At its heart, it's a fetish anime, you know? If you're into age gap, if you're not into age gap, don't watch it. If you're not into pseudo incest, don't watch it. That's really all there is to say about it. The animation melted so much by the end that it is actually pretty fun for a hate watch because you keep going. It's all of the off-model faces in these supposedly sexy moments are crazy. They completely fall apart. I do want to point out real quick that if this is something you're into, it's still not a very good show. But I did appreciate that they kind of do address the experience gap because, spoilers, they get together at the end.
Oh, really? Wow.
And he is an adult man. He has had sex before many times. And so his expectations are, okay, this girl and I are getting together. Let's have sex. And they kind of have to work through that. So I did appreciate that about it. But it's still not a good anime by any stretch of the imagination. So let's move on towards Protocol Rain. So I'm also going to monologue about this one. I haven't watched the last episode yet because I was traveling around the holidays and then premiere started. It's not good. It gets pretty wild towards the end. There's a whole big melodrama about how this guy wants the main character. God, I can't think of any of the characters' names. So this guy wants the main character to become a professional esports player. And to do that, he has to cast off everything he wants to do. And the little sister, he says, is probably psychosomatically disabled because she really wants her older brother to take care of her. And there's a lot of screaming, no, in the rain. At one point, she crawls out the door and falls down the stairs of their apartment building, and he finds her face down at the bottom of the stairs in a puddle. And he takes her into the shower. And I'm just like, no, don't do that. She probably has a spinal injury. If she was only psychosomatically disabled before, she could very well be for real paralyzed now after you've done this. Don't move people who have fallen down who might have a neck injury, guys. Just don't do it. So yeah, there's the little sister stuff gets so weird. It's so strange.
Really pulling away from the esports.
Yeah. The esports is whatever. It all goes into drama. The actress girls, her manager wants her to stop playing because what if someone finds out? It's a conflict with her image. And I feel like you could dig into that where she has to give up things in her life about in order to be successful. And it's not like a time thing. You can't have both because they conflict with each other. The conflict is you have to put on this public persona of being hyper feminine, and playing esports is counter to that, which I don't want to spend too much time on this show because it's not a good show. I'm not recommending it. But that is kind of a mess. And there is something that we could unpack a lot there if we really wanted to. But I don't feel like that's a particularly productive discussion. So let's move up to...
This is what Vrai has to say about KamiErabi God.app, which is Yoko Taro's anime this season. Vrai says, I'm pretty sure I'm the only person on Earth watching this, despite it being somehow getting a continuation. I wanted to shout it out because while it's not getting a formal rec, I really like it. I'd still primarily recommend it to other people with Yoko Taro brainworms, but it's also easily the most interesting take I've seen on the Death Game concept in years. It feels like it has actual compassion for its characters in spite of the occasional edgelordish flair, and the kind of hopeful melancholy I associate with Yoko Taro's works. Did I roll my eyes when there was a monologue about Schrodinger's cat delivered by the antagonist to his saintly blind sister? Absolutely, but in an affectionate way. I did find myself wishing it had been a game rather than an anime. The aesthetic is striking, but it does look unavoidably janky in a way that would feel more forgivable in an interactive medium. Also, the opening and ending, both jams. Also, take this with a grain of salt because my knowledge of Japanese is fairly rudimentary, but it does kind of bother me that the protagonist's familiar, lol, is referred to as she in the subtitles, when nearly as I've been able to hear, the dialogue either avoids pronouns or uses indirect language like koitsu when talking about them. Possibly there was a nuance I missed that the translator caught, but it did stick out. Alright, those were Vry's notes on KamiErabi God.app.
Now, y'all can talk about the 100 girlfriends who really, 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 really love you.
By the time this comes out, it will be clear that we are not putting it on our recommendations page. And I guess I should explain why, despite the fact that I was very glowing in my 3-episode review. So, I mean, there's some really obvious problems. The thing is that this show is, like, pretty well written in terms of comedy. It is very funny. Most of the girls are great. But then, the last 2 arcs have introduced 2 girls who, are less great. I forget her name. Chemistry Girl. What's Chemistry Girl's name? Is it Kutsuri?
Yeah, it's gotta be Kusuri as a joke, yeah.
Why is that a joke?
Kusuri. Kusuri means medicine.
Oh, of course. She's Medicine Girl. Yeah, so, I mean, her whole shtick is that she, like, drugs people without their consent, and then they have all these weird side effects and hate the fact that she drugged them without their consent, and then they abandon her. And she's, like, all scarred from having people abandon her for drugging them without their consent. Sometimes in sexual ways.
Perhaps she should stop doing that.
Yeah,
Perhaps
maybe.
she should stop doing that.
And then Rentaro's reaction is not to be like, hey, let's figure out other ways for you to experiment with this that don't require human subjects or require people without their consent. No, his reaction is, I will always help you clean up any mess you're in. That is not a good mindset. It almost reminds me of, like, when we look at, for example, situations like Nicki Minaj, who covers for her, like, abuser boyfriend, or, like, just all these situations where people cover for their abuser partners, and, like, it's just, like, represented as this act of love when it's not. It's enabling. Yeah, I fucking hate her. I despise her as a character. The only good thing that came out of her arc is when Hikari imagined what it would be like if she got the titty growth juice, and it's just the most absurd eldritch horror you've ever seen, and that was very funny. But you know, that's like basically saying, like, the best character in the show, Hikari, objectively, salvaged a tiny little grain of, like, gold from the worst character in the show. And then, you know, the last arc with Hikari's mom, obvious age gap problem, you know, obvious, you know, pedophilia problem. Not even gonna go into that. Not worth it. But the other issue is just that a lot of the show is about like these horizontal relationships between the girls, especially for Hikari, given that her and Tsundere girl, like, there's a running gag that they are like actually in love with each other pretty much as they are in love with Rentaro. Like, it's heavily like they like kiss, they snuggle up together and make out in their sleep. They're like, it's kind of a running gag that they're both bisexual, which, you know, gag bisexuality is, especially for female bisexual characters, is starting to annoy me, like, after, I don't know, like, seeing it in The Good Place and now in this. But it is nice that they're bisexual, don't get me wrong, I like that. But then to have Hikari's mom become one of the girlfriends introduces all kinds of problems. I don't know if you should be in the cuck chair while you watch your mom fuck your boyfriend, to be very vulgar about it, right? Like, situations like that are what could arise, right? And I don't want to think about that. That's weird. All sorts of things are just arising from this that I don't like. Is it still well written? Yes. Did I still cry at certain points? Yes. But is it something that I would recommend on a feminist anime website? Absolutely not.
That's fair. I am curious what you thought of the cross-dressing gag was that the last episode? How that was
I
handled.
thought that was very funny. I liked that. I think I mostly liked that because I got to see Nano in that absolutely amazing Prince outfit.
Yeah, I think it kind of started out where I was like, uh-oh, but then I do think it wrapped up nicely by having the mom go, well, if he is unconscious, then we need to bring him back by having Nano dress up like a prince and then kiss him to bring him back to life. I was like, wow, that's some amazing internal logic. That's very good.
And it really fakes you out because it makes you think that like she's having sex with him.
Yes. Oh yeah. Before that, yeah, the scene implies that they're having sex when she's dressing him up in a schoolgirl outfit.
Right, which is an interesting bait and switch.
Yeah.
Morally neutral. I don't have any feelings about it other than it being like, okay, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't particularly funny. And then, of course, you know, there's the whole peeping thing, but, you know, it's like, yeah, all the girls have an arc where they peep on Rentaro, you know. Yeah. That's what happens in the last episode.
Yeah, I think it does a lot of, interesting stuff with rom-com tropes, but at the same time, it is using those rom-com tropes and ends up falling into the pitfall, even if it kind of fakes you out at the end.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, like, I think the show is saying some interesting things about polyamory and specifically, like, toxic monogamy culture, or, like, how monogamy culture can, like, and gosh, I know I'm using a very discourse-laden term, but, you know, like, for example, right, like, Hikari's mom's arc, you know, being kind of that if she started having sex with other people or dating other people, that's, like, betraying the memory of her dead boyfriend.
Yeah.
Which I thought it was interesting to think about how, like, ideas of jealousy and monogamy and, like, you know, you can only love one person, prevent a person from, like, grieving and mourning and, like, fully moving on. I thought that was a really interesting idea. But again, you know, the show is, as I said, it's not a poorly written show. It's just a show I would not recommend to anime feminist people.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't recommend it on a feminist level.
Exactly. That's what that would be a better way of putting it. Yeah. On a feminist level, it doesn't work. No.
But that doesn't preclude it from being a good show.
Yeah, and it doesn't preclude it from certain people in the anime feminist community liking it.
Okay. So let's move forward to the Yuzuki family's 4 sons, which I am also the only one who watched it. This one I also need to still watch the last episode. Still a lovely show. One of my best of the year, honestly. Not a lot new to say about it this time around. So let's move up to Tearmoon Empire, which I am somehow the only person on this show watching it.
To be fair, I've watched the opening like 300 times.
So, I mean, the opening does kind of give the vibe that you're looking for.
It's Great opening.
Yeah. What can I say about Tearmoon Empire? It's a really fun show. It continued to be fun to the end. Political revolution and what's going on there. It was a little disappointing to me that, spoilers, it didn't turn out that the revolution was just because Mia was a crappy empress. Because I personally think that is a perfectly valid reason. And if she doesn't want to be executed, she should learn to be a better empress, which is kind of what the show was about, except that it was about her selfishly trying to avoid death and just becoming an empress in the process and fooling everyone into thinking that she was really smart and canny when she was actually just like pretty dopey, which is fun. It's a fun premise. I don't feel like I have a whole ton to say about it. You know, maybe someone will disagree. Maybe someone will have more to say about it. I'm sure it'll come up in our recommendations.
It's a good romp.
So, yeah, it's fun. It's super fun. It's got pretty solid animation. I really enjoy Mia. It's funny. It's not the kind of series that I think is going to stick in my head very well. I don't want to say it's standard because I like it more than a lot of other series. But it has the same kind of tone as a lot of kind of the Regency-ish, Villainess-ish series that are out these days. Do you know what I mean? Like Magi&Revo, for example. It's kind of the same vibes where like there's this big cast of background characters and they're all really fun, but they've got kind of like this shallow characterization. It's got kind of that art style. The main character is a total doofus, no thoughts, head empty, and everyone adores her.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good show. I recommend it. So, next up, Peter, do you have anything to say about Shangri-La Frontier?
Not much. Maybe I should bring up that it turns out the like promoted in the OP and all the key art stuff is one guy and two girls who are kind of like the central trio of the series. They finally introduced the short-haired, blonde, punchy girl who it turns out I don't know if I need to give it too much. It's played by a boy, and the kind of reveal for that is very matter of fact. There's no jokes about it or anything. They're saying like, oh, he just likes to play girl characters, and kind of even explains it to an NPC like you shouldn't judge people based on appearances, which I don't know if I want to say is exceptional or just exceeded what I was expecting to be the reveal when you're given that knowledge. So there's that. Otherwise, it's just a lot of. Did you like Sword Art Online? Well, that we're doing that too.
Oh, well, I didn't like Sword Art Online, so.
I gotta give it credit where credit's due. That's what I'll say. The end.
So next up, I am going to monologue a little bit more for a couple more shows, it looks like, about Paradox Live the animation, which is not a good show.
Wait, is this a new revelation? I remember you saying it had a lot of good characters.
No,
it had a lot of good characters, but it
it's-
wasn't interesting was the problem?
Yeah, it's not a new revelation. It is definitely the same thing that I have been saying since the beginning, but I did watch the last episode minutes before recording, and it just... It is an ensemble show that does not know how to juggle its ensemble. If we have time, I'll talk about Hypnosis Mic because I can't help comparing the two. They're both about rap battles, like literal rap battles. That's all there is to it. Like, I cannot help the comparisons. Hypnosis Mic knows how to juggle its ensemble a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
it still had the issue where the main characters were the most boring group that honestly had the least going on. I don't understand why they're the main characters. In the end, the big reveal is about an entirely different group, and they literally just wander up and then they say some platitudes and everything is okay. The ending twist comes... there's an ending twist about Cosmez, the twins, or yeah, I think they're twins, which I guess is decently foreshadowed, but there's a whole thing about how this guy wants to use phantom metal to merge everyone's consciousnesses. It's the Instrumentality Project / it's Code Geass / whatever. It's the exact same conclusion as like every single other series that does something similar, where they say we have to, think about our group and love our friends, but at the same time, we are all individuals and we don't want to become an actual literal hive mind. And thus we must fight against it, which, I mean, that's fine. That's pretty much correct. I don't want to become a hive mind, despite what people may say about us at Anime Feminist. But it's not original. The characters that I'm interested in never really get their arcs. My boy Hokusai and Simon, like, two characters who are just so made for me in different ways. Their backstories aren't revealed. One of them's a widower. I love widowers. They're so sad in such an appealing way. So, Paradox Live, not very good. It's a pretty show. I'm disappointed. I wanted it to be good. But you know what is good? Overtake. But I don't actually have that much to talk about with regards to this show in particular, with this particular discussion. I do think it is legitimately a really, really good show. Like, easily, I didn't put it in my top 5 for the season, but it is definitely one of the best of the season. It's got a lot to say about recovering from trauma. Even it talks a bit. So the main character, Koya, he has trauma. He has a hard time taking pictures of human subjects because when the big tsunami hit in 2011, he took a picture of this girl who was about to get swallowed up. And he got a ton of criticism. And it's the same stuff that photojournalists always get. Why didn't you help them? Why did you just sit there and take pictures when someone was dying? Mm-hmm. Even though it is I personally think photojournalists do a really important job. It's important to document these kinds of things. And what was he going to do to save this little girl from a tsunami? He would have just gotten swallowed up too. But people don't think that way. They just think, why didn't you save her? And yeah, I would have saved her. I would have leapt in the path of this huge wall of water that killed hundreds, thousands, and dodged, and I would have done a roll. I would have tucked and rolled, and I would have been okay. So a lot of the plot is about him recovering from that in parallel with Haruka moving forward from his own father's death and his survivor guilt, because it's always survivor guilt. And it's a really beautiful show. I did have a thought as I watched, oh man, people are going to ship these two, aren't they? Even though one's like a full-ass adult and one is a high school student. God damn it, people are going to ship this. Which, shippers are going to ship.
Oh yeah, I have a similar complaint later on in this podcast.
To its credit, it didn't feel like it was doing the tiger and bunny ship teasing thing. It felt more like there's not just a simple way to sum up their relationship. It's two people who needed each other whose problems worked in such a way where they were able to lift each other up. Like, it is a friendship, but it's something more than that, but it's not romantic. It doesn't feel really familial either. It's not mentor and mentee. I've been watching 30 Rock. It's just, they have this bond that isn't really easily definable, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. Kind of like Sweetness and Lightning.
Yeah, kind of like that. I would say that's a fair, it's a decent parallel.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move up towards my new boss is Goofy. Toni.
Boss is Goofy is, it's kind of the same as where we were in the mid-season, where it's very sweet, very ship teasy, very, but still, queer people do exist in this world, as represented by Kincho. Love him to death. He's still flirty and fruity, which I appreciate as a combination. And, the two co-protagonists are still essentially a married couple living together. The show ends, and, spoiler alert, he moves out, but, into, the next door apartment, so it's they can still basically act like a married couple, only just come over whenever, they're a sitcom, found family. I still find the senior boss to be a one-note character who's annoying, and I kind of wish that he would get over himself, because his whole shtick is anytime other people are having joy, he's like, but nobody will ever love me. And then someone else has to be like, I'll love you, for him to just not just fall into a void of depression. Which, I don't know, I don't want to blame people for their own mental illness, but also if that's your entire character, I think the show needs to do a better job of writing that character.
Do something with that self-loathing.
Right, because
yeah.
Because I think on one hand, there does need to be room for characters with mental illness in shows that just kind of exist within the show and don't it doesn't have to be fixed for them to be part of the found family in the show, right? But I would like to see some character development. God damn it. But anyways, Boss is Goofy is fine. I like it. It's a good show. It made my recommendation list. Yeah, I still stand by my review where I said it's Fujoshi bait.
That's a hot take.
Is it though? When literally there's a character in the first episode who is our point of view, not a point of view character, but basically an audience surrogate lady who looks at the two co-protagonists and is oh my god, Shirasaki's harassing him, with a big smile on her face. It's not even hiding it. Anyways, moving on.
Moving on to Migi&Dali, which I believe you two both watched and has been recommended to me because apparently it handles the twin thing actually really well.
Yeah, tell me your perspective, Peter. I've been talking a lot.
Oh, well, just Caitlin, I was specifically thinking of you in the later development where, I know your feelings toward twins, especially identical twins. And it seemed like the last arc was kind of made for you in regards to how it treats the development of their relationship and kind of both of them as individuals.
Is it more interesting than everyone thinks of these two twins as the same, but they're actually different people and they have to forge their own identities?
Well, everyone does literally think of them as the same because they've been masquerading as a single person and switching places. But I think what it comes down to is it's them both beginning to realize that they're really, obviously they're very close, and they've really been relying on each other because that's how they've survived up until this point. And they've had this singular goal that's defined all of their actions. But as the story develops, I think they begin to want different things in relation to that goal. And that begins to kind of pull them apart because one of them is still bent on revenge and the other one kind of decides that revenge isn't as important to him, and because revenge to them was a means of achieving a new happiness, right? and their methods they start to argue a lot about their methods and what they're willing to do or sacrifice to achieve this goal, and that really creates a rift between the two of them. So like for the first time they're fighting, and eventually they get to the point where they just go, "Well, obviously we can't work together. We have to live. We're too different now. We can't work together on this goal anymore." And they have to kind of come around to appreciating their differences, and I wouldn't say treating each other as different people, but kind of recognizing that there's value in their differences, where previously they found so much power in being able to collaborate and like kind of obfuscate their different identities with other people. So I think what shines through really strongly is like them saying like, well, us being brothers, the most important thing is that we want each other to be happy no matter what, and we are going to be very different people. So no matter how different we become, we still have that connection. So I think you'll like it if you watch it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also say I think the twin thing, the that kind of arc of like differentiation is a little more thematically resonant because their whole becoming the same person was a coping mechanism and survival strategy, right? For like surviving the organized abandonment they were experiencing as foster care, as I guess adoptive children, you know, formerly in the foster care system. So it was very I found it really thematically resonant.
Yeah, the whole conceit of them even pretending to be one person is that only one person's going to get adopted, so it's the only way to stay together. So I don't think it was like they were doing it for fun or anything. They were just like, this is how we don't get separated permanently. Outside of that, it's kind of difficult to, I guess, analyze, at least from where I'm sitting, just because the ending, I mean, I loved it, but it just got so out there, and like really like leaned into this like crazy switch between kind of like this ludicrous, almost like humorous surrealist style and like this pretty horrific like narrative, and at like the events like genuine people getting murdered on screen, and like going between those two near the end, I think it really balanced it out well, and it was like the ending was really great, the last like 3 or 4 episodes. But I don't know if I could really say, I don't know if I have much to say like critically about it besides the fact that it was just huge.
Yeah, I will say it was like no other anime I've ever seen, and I mean that in the best way possible. Absolutely fantastic anime. I think that the development of Migi&Dali as characters and how they change is incredibly compelling. I think that I think Dali is definitely trans. I think that there's a whole thing where he likes to cross dress.
even
And
even at the very end, like the final, like the not the epilogue, the epilogue, they just fit it
yeah,
in again. Yeah.
they do. Sally is part of the family. Um, yeah, no, I really love Migi&Dali. It's making my top 5 of the year list. I most of my thoughts about what's so amazing about it are in the mid-season podcast. You can listen to that. In short, it's just a really powerful investigation of like how people cope with organized abandonment, and then how do people like come together to resist that, and try to find a way out. I
Yeah.
love it so much.
It might be worth mentioning. I feel like some of I don't really. This is kind of like just something I want to bring up. I don't really feel very strongly about this, but I do think it kind of like framed the villain as being like
We do have to talk about that.
a woman who's kind of twisted by the fact that she's barren and can't give birth to children, which kind of turns her into this monster who like brings about all the events in the plot, which is kind of, yeah, not too great, but I don't think it made it a big part of the.
Well, there's that, but also I think what ameliorates that a bit is a couple things. I think first of all, it's like very clear that she is extremely invested in particular kinds of ideals of womanhood, right?
Mhm.
And I think that and saw her job as to kind of like mentor other people in those ideals of womanhood, right? And then eventually that kind of role becomes like this almost, I must make the entire town conform to my idea of the nuclear family.
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of part and parcel to her perfectionism. Yeah.
Yeah. Migi&Dali is really good. Watch it.
So, we're moving on. Are there anything in the notes about I'm giving the disgraced noble lady I rescued a crash course in
No.
naughtiness?
No.
Anything to say about that? Nope. All right. So,
Frieren.
let's move up to Frieren, which I am still behind on.
I'm behind
Got through
on
the
it.
demon arc. I did get through the demon arc. I feel like that's been discussed a lot. I just
Yeah.
want to say, I think it's a potentially really interesting concept, but they didn't follow through with it as much as they should have. They let too much human society creep into how the demons interacted with each other in the world, and therefore it didn't come through, I think, and had a lot of the same issues that every fantasy series has with evil races.
Yep.
Yep. Peter, do you have anything new to say about it, so it's not just me rehashing what we've talked about?
Bleeding a little bit into the second core here, I do feel like it's kind of pulled back on. I mean, it still comes up this thing that the basic formula is kind of just become sort of a humorous adventure series where there's kind of goofy interactions between the characters mixed with kind of more serious moments, like there's this dance scene that everybody's been talking about between Fern and Stark, where obviously they're doing like some romance between the characters, but I think it's kind of sliding backward into kind of more of a standard adventure series, which if you like the interactions between the characters, and of course the gorgeous animation and stuff, and with the occasional reference to Himmel, then I mean it's still good. Very recently they've moved into like they're taking some sort of magical exam to get a certification so that they can cross some sort of threshold, which just feels like it's about to enter like a shonen-esque tournament arc, which I'm not too enthused about. But that is all to say, I think it's kind of these like themes about temporality and mortality that it was focusing on in the early season. And I mean, it's kind of hard to continue just making the series just about that. Are kind of taking a backseat to just present day adventures, the party being kind of funny and offbeat a little bit, and having.
So this is no To Your Eternity.
No, yeah. To Your Eternity definitely had a thesis that it was sticking with. Frieren, I think, is just kind of like it's fantasy adventure now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be really honest. I'm through the demon arc now, and I just genuinely don't think that Frieren is as deep as people think it is. But that's all I really have to say about it.
No. I like it. Although my anime club did decide to drop it. We were just too far behind. I'm probably going to try to catch up.
I mean, it's fun.
So let's... I did drop Firefighter Daigo. It was just too boring. It was so boring. And no one's watching it, so I can't hear whether or not it's gotten better. But let's talk about BULLBUSTER for a moment. There are a lot of series where a lot of stories, a lot of anime and otherwise, where the main enemy is a big evil corporation. Right?
Yeah.
And the answer is always a plucky group of individuals have to take them down somehow. BULLBUSTER is kind of that basic idea. But as the show goes, it delves more into kind of the structural reasons that corporations are really hard to knock down. Turns out, when a company has a lot of money, they have a lot of tactics available to them to avoid consequences, such as buying out smaller companies that would oppose them, such as denying access to resources, such as having the control and the ability to cover up their actions. And that's what BULLBUSTER is about in the end.
Okay, so not a happy ending, I'm gathering.
It's on a relatively small scale. Like the main conflict is on a relatively small scale. You know, it's this one island and this one plant. So they are able to overcome the enemy through, shall we say, direct action to some, maybe eco-terrorism to others.
Oh yeah, I love Final Fantasy VII.
It's good. It's really good. It's not the bad guys don't win, but also there's this feeling of, well, we took care of this problem, but they've managed to weasel their way out of real consequences still.
Okay, I can respect that.
And yeah, and they are still a problem.
Yeah, that's real.
But we're still, yeah, we're going to enjoy this one victory that we've got.
Yeah. So many of these series, I think, kind of don't know what to do because they kind of have a recognition of that, or they want to talk about a problem and they don't have any ideas for a solution. So it just ends like Decadence, where they just like ask the government nicely to completely change itself, and they're just like, I was just waiting for somebody to be polite. So I think this kind of ending, that I respect that more, where you're like, I don't have the answers, but we can take small victories.
Yeah, because these series want to tackle problems that don't have solutions, right? We haven't figured out the solutions in the real world, so you can't just create this solution out of thin air in fiction if you're creating something that has a lot of parallels to the real world.
Or at least the solution we do have, maybe they wouldn't be cool with us broadcasting it on television.
Yeah. Was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it really goes into like a lot of the tools that big companies have in their toolbox. Also, charismatic CEOs who are really good at saying the right things.
I do think there's value in kind of referencing a podcast, citations needed, but kind of revealing the tools that corporations use to misinform and manipulate like public sentiment or get themselves out of trouble so that they can be recognized in the real world too. So
I do want to do a quick update about kind of the thing that I was critical of in the mid-season, where the one character who was a big stickler for the rules was kind of being written as a pain in the butt. He was right. Like, he was still a pain in the butt, but he did a lot of malicious compliance, which is another tool in kind of the activist toolbox that you don't see a lot of in these kinds of stories. It was really cool. It was it's not like a good series to watch if you want just like fighting mechas, and the idea that a bipedal robot is somehow more useful than like a tank is silly. But it's still like, I really, really ended up liking what it was doing. I can't think of anything I've seen like it in anime. One thing I think it could have gone into more is how governments are also complicit, if not active participants in these kinds of things. Like, the government was very like hands off with this. Although maybe that's the political situation in Japan. I don't know too much about corporate law there. Yeah, no, BULLBUSTER, really good show. Another show that has good ideas is Our Dating Story, the experienced you and the inexperienced me. I've got a lot of what I feel about it is the same as what I said in the mid-season podcast, which is that it has a good heart. It's sweet. It covers a lot of it talks openly about kind of consent in relationships, not just consent, but enthusiastic consent, and kind of how sex interacts with a lot of aspects of relationships. It's just so boring. Runa and Ryuto are just such boring characters.
It'd be cool if this story about consent had leads with chemistry. Or interesting leads.
Yeah, because then...
Yeah.
I want to believe that these people conceivably want to fuck each other.
There's a line in the last episode where someone's like, yeah, Runa, you and Ryuto really seem to be the perfect match. It's like, yeah, because they're the two most boring people in the world. There's a few other things thrown in for drama. There's the whole drama with her twin sister. They want to parent trap their parents. I want the character writing of My Love Story, which is another very, very sweet romance, but with really engaging, fun characters, grafted onto the storyline of this. I feel like that could be a great series. Also, enough with the sweet, innocent gals, y'all. Come on. Gal subculture is so much more interesting than that. Let's actually do something with it.
Putting out a call.
So yeah, moving forward, do we have any notes about I'm in love with the Villainess?
We do. I'll go ahead and read those. So Vrai says about I'm in love with the Villainess. Functionally, I'm at the same place I was at mid-season. There's a big old heartfelt mess by a queer creator feeling things out, which makes it compelling. I'll pick up the light novel eventually. There is, unfortunately, a bonus warning now for a romanticized sibling incest, which is discussed but not shown. I rolled my eyes pretty hard, and it definitely took me back to 80s, 90s manga where artists got away with depicting positive queer romance, by lumping it under the veneer of sexy, forbidden love, which you usually had to put up with some incest ships, too, because of that. I don't think it's I'm going to recommend the anime, though. It's visually stiff. It doesn't cut anything from the source material that would smooth out the adaptation and make it stand on its own better. And it ends when it feels like it's finally starting to get into the good stuff. My understanding is this is because the second light novel is very thick and pretty dense. So they really poured over book 1 and barely got into book 2, but it makes for a frustrating viewing experience. Probably go for the light novel and manga instead. That is Vry's thoughts on Love with Villainess. We can move on.
Y'all can talk about Shy now. Unless we have notes about Stardust Telepaths.
We do?
But it doesn't seem like anyone really... Do we? It doesn't
No.
seem like anyone really... I didn't see anyone discussing that show. Sorry, Yuri fans. It seems like this one just didn't get people's attention.
I wrote the recommendation for it, so you can read my recommendation. Just generally, good show. I like it. I've written a lot about it. You can read any of my writing if you want to know my thoughts on it. Peter, what are your thoughts on Shy?
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the series. I definitely think some of the side character stories are really good. I think especially Pesha's thing with her mom, and I mean basically the big climactic battle of the first season took 4 or 5 episodes altogether. I thought that was really good. Although on the same note, it felt very it had a lot of emotional impact, but also when I kind of think about it abstractly, I feel like it was very kind of ridiculous and emotionally manipulative, with like her mom having the most tragic thing that could possibly happen ever happening to her. Uh,
Do you mean the
so
cake shock? The cake shock moment?
yeah, just well, I mean, her whole back like orphan into single mom that can't feed her kid into being given a cake on Christmas miraculously so she could feed her hungry daughter, and then being like basically just murdered by a homeless man before she can give her daughter a
That
Christmas cake.
sucked. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I will say though yeah, continue with what you're saying.
yeah, I'm just it's just like it kind of reminded me of what's that series about? There's a series about a psychic girl uh, that the lead in it was a meme for a while because somebody had posted up a video where it's just like her backstory, which is the first half of the first episode, and is the most ridiculously tragic series of events you could possibly imagine. Where at a certain point you're just like, I'm being emotionally manipulated right now. Um, yeah, so like, yeah, I mean, it worked. It had a lot of impact, but it's still unclear what this is feeding into. Um, and you see, I don't know what to say. I feel like I might need to watch the rest of it before I can really make a determination on whether all this is worth it. I can definitely, it's like it worked from the emotional angle. I think it was very well presented, and I was like, dang, this is really sad. I'm really sad. And it had the catharsis at the end when the fight kind of, when they solve her problem and show her that she was loved and all that. Uh, Unfortunately, Shy herself, I don't think is a very. I don't know if there's a lot to her. It's just like she's like, yes, I have anxiety, but I don't think the series is very interested in exploring that at the end of the day. Um, so, yeah, I don't know where I fall with it. I'm gonna check out season two. I'm interested in like the whole conceit of the villain, and I think depending upon like what the villain's actual plan is and how they kind of bring that out. I feel like I say this a lot, but I kind of like need to finish the show before I I want to pass any judgment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't entirely agree in terms of the like. I have very complex feelings about like poverty porn, for example, because having worked with a lot of students who are in foster care or like in those sort of situations, well, on one hand, I do think that like I said this in my recommendation. The view of foster care and orphanages in the show is extremely rosy in the sense of while the kids are there, group homes are not a fun place to be in real life.
Yeah.
Really not fun.
What? You mean when you get a bunch of children who have been through terrible stuff and put them all in a place together with insufficient adult supervision, bad things can happen?
Yeah, you don't say. And so I think that frustrated me. But in terms of like the idea of the after people lose the support of even the tiny little support that they did have, because the foster care system does provide a slight amount of support for these kids, right? Versus being like completely on their own, right? Which is what happens when foster kids often, when they turn 18, the transitional process is often very non-existent. I thought that was honest. Like, the idea that, like, losing that can be a devastating moment for a young adult and then can lead to a cycle of poverty. Now, in terms of, like, hunger and stuff, I don't know much about Russia. I don't think this is necessarily supposed to be representative of a specific, like... I mean, theoretically it is Russia, right? I don't know much about Russia's social safety net. I can't speak to the verisimilitude of that or whatever. But, again, this is why I have complex feelings about quote-unquote poverty porn, especially as somebody, I've never been in poverty. I didn't grow up in poverty, even if I have, like, very close family who did, like my mom. So I feel unqualified to really speak to, like, how poverty is represented on screen. Anyways, yeah, complicated feelings, but overall I like the show. We can move on.
Okay. All right then. I believe none of us watched it, but I believe we have some notes about PreCure Full Bloom.
We just have the recommendation. If you want to know more about
Okay.
PreCure Full Bloom, take a look at D's recommendation. It should probably be up, I'd imagine, by the time that this podcast goes up. So D has a recommendation for that.
All right, let's talk about the Apothecary Diaries. I feel like Apothecary Diaries needs an entire episode to itself to really fully talk about. Maybe I'm just saying that because that's been true of other stuff we've talked about, but I'm watching the Apothecary Diaries.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really love this show.
Yeah, that's great.
I love how it kind of delves into the idea of the power relationships between these characters, between Jinchi and Mao Mao, and how Mao Mao is so aware of it all the time. But he's not, because he has the luxury of not being aware of it. His life doesn't hinge on not offending Mao Mao, as much as she might want to kill him sometimes. Mao Mao is just a super duper fun character. I love her. I love Aoyuki's character for it. I am going to drop a hot take here. I'm totally okay with shipping Jinchi and Mao Mao. No. I genuinely think...
No,
I literally foreshadowed I hate their relationship.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I sincerely think they are the endgame ship.
I don't like it.
Like, even if you don't personally like it, I do think that they are the end game. They are going to get together by the end of the show.
Oh, okay.
So we better get used to it.
Well, I think a lot of people agree
Or
with
not
you.
the show, by the end of the story.
I think what Anime Trending's like top romance of the season by fan vote was a tie between Himmel and Frieren and Jinchi and Mao Mao, I think. And I was...
Wasn't it Fern and Stark?
No, I don't know if they'd done the dance thing by the time the votes were in. But you could be right.
I just don't think... I just don't think Himmel and Frieren is a particularly interesting show.
I remember just seeing the tie and going like, I don't like either of these. I don't... Just the power imbalance. I guess I looked it up. They're actually pretty similar age, although it does not seem that way looking at the show. She's like 2 feet shorter than him or something.
He's tall and she's short. He's had a lifetime of good nutrition and good sleep.
Just in general, her size compared to most characters makes me think that she's very young compared to almost everyone else in the cast. Like, they are adults and she is not.
She's just short. She's
That's
just
fair.
short. Short people exist.
True. They do exist.
I have friends who are couples who are over a foot apart, you know?
It's so funny. As a gay Asian person, I'm always surprised at how many people who I date who are actually my height, given I'm 5'4". And I'm like, oh yeah, because I often date Asians, so... A lot of us
take
are
it for
shorties.
granted.
What'd you say?
Yeah,
we're taking it for granted over here. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. 6
Showing
feet
my
tall.
privilege, yeah.
Toni and I are the same height.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. I feel like... Okay, we'll talk more later off pod. All right, should we move on? Do we still want to keep talking about this, or?
I'm trying to think about, what there is to say about, other than kind of the discussion we've had about the power relationships. And I do think if there is going to be a reason not to ship them, I think the power imbalance between the two of them is probably the most valid one.
Also, the fact that she does not seem interested at all, and he keeps coming onto her, and she just is trying to slither out from under him all the time. Listen. We could get into that. We could get into that. I'm choosing not to get into that because that will turn into a whole debate. Okay.
I mean, there are plenty of reasons not to ship them. I think the most concrete one is the power imbalance, because that is also such a thing in the show. But it's a really fantastic show. I've said that so many
I
times.
feel like there's going to be more to
Trying to-
say about the show because it's continuing in the next mid-season and wrap up based on like some of the new story arcs it's getting into, because it seems to be wanting to pay more attention to current and new members of like the courtesans that their whole court kind of surrounds. So I think there will be more thematic insights to look into probably as some new plot developments come out.
Yeah. I do gotta say that I'm an episode behind. The tall girl with the eyebrows is really hot. Anyway, so let's move on, because we do want to touch. There are a couple of sequels and carryovers that we're going to want to touch on. So 16-bit sensation, Another Layer.
I don't think any. Well, I have not basically watched it since the last cast. I know. I think Alex brought it up. I think it kind of was not actually interested in the kind of what seemed great about it at first was it was kind of like a celebration of a medium of art, and kind of wanted to delve into a person's relationship with that art by allowing her to travel to the past to see it like created in real time. But it seems like the way things have developed in the plot, it's more of a kind of like weird, it's about its own artifice basically, like what ifs based on if the past changed. So it's like, what if America was the one creating AAA visual novels or something like that.
I did see American
Fate.
Saber.
Yeah. So and kind of like her relationship with this dude ultimately affecting how he developed the games. So I feel like the main appeal where it's like you have this woman who's a fan of the visual novel genre. It's not about her actually getting to like interact with and better appreciate this medium, or get new insights out of it based on her experiences in the past. It's more like, what if she went into the past and changed the future, and then whoa, the future's so weird. And also she teaches a guy a very important lesson, and that causes him to change the future of the visual novel genre. Yeah, so I have not caught up, but I don't know if I want to anymore.
So I do have a question. What I thought was really interesting, because from what I could tell, it was mostly focused on Bishoujo games. Do they do anything with the main character being a girl who loves Bishoujo games? Because I know that is a type of person. They're just not the main audience. So do they do anything in particular with it? Like why she is so drawn to these stories that are about getting to know girls largely getting to know girls in a romantic context and or fucking them.
I don't really think there's anything in regards to like so her appreciation for the game. Well, first of all, I think she has experience with the genre, and that's why she started working in it. It's just the industry has changed. So the types of games she wanted to work on had very like ambitious plots, and like kind of while it has beautiful girls, it's also got a lot going on with like the story and the world building and like cool visuals and stuff. So it's like she's behind the times, her own times kind of thing, and wants to bring back the way things used to be. As far as like her appreciation for the girls, I think like she definitely likes the art style, and they do get in up to a bit about like how, since there was fewer pixels on the screen, you would create the like illusion of curves based on like the pixel arrangements and the way they like would draw the thing and then like scan it in black and white and then color it in on a screen. So like kind of like the art form she has an appreciation for. She definitely likes the girl character designs. She herself likes drawing cute girls and stuff. But I don't think they really get into anything like
Right.
Well, I don't know what to.
Right, or even just like not necessarily about her being attracted to women, but just if there's any way that her gender interacts with her love of the game. But it sounds like there isn't.
No, some of the people that she meets in that, I think they did kind of put on display the fact that that industry does have a lot of women working in it, specifically female artists. So she's kind of part of a. I like this. They don't really get into it. It's just like what you see is like that a lot of women want to draw cute girls and have been an integral part of this industry. They're behind a lot of the like iconic designs from games that you recognize because Aniplex owns a lot of these properties. So they specifically like call out titles that were produced by Aniplex, or at least the anime adaptations were. So yeah, you can kind of see that for sure.
All right. Okay. Cool. That is something that I was wondering about. So thanks for talking on that a bit, Peter. So that wraps up our discussion of all of the one core shows. Let's touch very quickly on a few sequels and carryovers. Toni, I know that you wanted to talk about Zom 100. I'll give room for you to do that at the end. I just want to check in about the things that I was watching. Hypnosis Mic Season 2. If you like the first season, you'll probably like this one too. The rapping gets better overall. There are too many characters. There's just too many characters now. It's so many boys. It's 18 boys, not counting the antagonist. It's so many boys, not counting the antagonist.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but too many boys.
It is too many boys. I like one of the new groups. Their musical style might be my favorite. It's got kind of an electro swing vibe to it. I'm not a big rap person. So yeah, it's Hypnosis Mic continues to be fun. I was really hoping that the world government would get a chance to rap, but they don't. Oh well, maybe next time. Spy Family, the cruise ship arc is awesome. I really wish we had more time to talk about that because I think from the perspective of the site, the cruise ship arc has the most to talk about Yor's relationship with her work and what she does and kind of the cost of raising a child in this situation. She gets to have some really cool fights, which is great because she does not do that for most of the show. And I just want to say they should animate more fights where one of the characters is wearing a fit and flare dress because it looks really cool. You could do, there's so much motion with those skirts you could do. They go out when you spin, they swoosh. Animators, take note. Fit and flare dresses, great for dramatic motion. And I think that's it for me. Peter, did you have anything that you wanted to check in with very quickly?
Agree on Spy Family. I think it's great that Yor got a focus arc where she's being introspective because I think a lot of the time she just ends up being kind of goofy, awkward, or silly drunk. So it was a great arc. Ancient Magus Bride. Sure took a long time to get there, but as is typical with Yamazaki stories, it really nailed the ending. Big moment of catharsis. I'm doing a write-up for 2023 Rex where you can read a bit more if you're interested. But damn it, this show's still got its claws in me. That's all I've got.
All right.
Toni,
you really wanted to talk about Zom 100.
Finish us off.
Yeah,
here.
the
We're going to
reason
give
I
you the rest of the time of the
Your
show.
soapbox.
Which is like not much, but I'll take it. So yeah, Zom 100. The reason I really want to talk about it is because there's absolutely no way that I'm recommending it. I really, and so I'm not gonna have any other opportunities to talk about it, so I have to talk about it now. Now here's the thing. I was going back and forth about whether or not I'd recommend it. I was really going back and forth because I think that there's some stuff, a lot of the problems towards the beginning of the show are really ameliorated in terms of, like, the female cast gets centered a lot more, The middle arc is particularly fantastic, where Akira kind of falls back into old habits. He gets kind of brainwashed into being back into his old boss's cult, of like. And I think this idea of like workplace as cult is really interesting in the show, and it is very interested in how PTSD can make a person further susceptible to violence and exploitation in the workplace and otherwise, which I think is a very sophisticated analysis of how capitalism operates, which is to give us all this kind of collective PTSD around, like, getting fired and, make that experience such an experience of suffering that none of us ever fight back. So I think that there's a lot that the show does really well. Here's the problem. The show has such an intensity of hatred towards fat characters. And over again equates being thin and conventionally attractive with being morally righteous. Every single predator character in the show, every time a character is like, there's this constant sense of sexual menace, especially towards the men towards Shizuka and towards the women, Akira's love interest generally, right? Like for episode 1, Akira's love interest is like, being sexually harassed by his boss, right? And then Shizuka gets harassed by by the top of the company boss. Then Shizuka gets harassed by his old boss. And then, in the end, like, there's this another character who I'll get into, but all of these characters who are predators are represented as fat. I do not think that's a coincidence, especially given that all of the main characters in the show are extremely conventionally attractive. And then you get, and thin, obviously. And then you get to the last few episodes, and there are some images in the last few episodes that just really typify what Deshaun Harrison talks about in Belly of the Beast as being anti-fatness as anti-blackness. The way that one of this predatory character's lips are animated in this kind of grotesquely swollen way mirrors like this kind of blackface imagery and this extreme idea of blackness and fatness as like sexual predation, right? It's really grotesque and really violently anti-fat, really violent, and arguably, drawing upon anti-black imagery because that character is a little darker skinned and has braids in their hair, which kind of degenders them. So it's just incredibly violent in its hatred towards fat characters, and I just couldn't in good conscience recommend a show that is so blatant in such a way. Yep, that's, and I just needed to say that somewhere because it really made me it really frustrated me because otherwise I really like the show. But the more that I thought about it, the more I thought about the image of like this kind of swollen like lips that are symbolic of his sexual menace, the more I just became obvious I could not recommend it. Like,
yeah, that's no good.
Yeah, I mean, it's anti-fat, it's anti-black, it's all kinds of different things, right?
Yeah, especially when combined with the Dread story arc, the Dreadlocks.
Oh my god. Yeah, exactly. Like the show, and the thing about the Dread story arc is on its own, I other characters kind of call him out as being like, that does not look good on you, right? It's not a good look. And he gets rid of it, right? But like, when you combine it with, a character who has, braids. Now, obviously, they don't look like actual black person braids because, but that character being represented as this predator, then it really just makes it obvious that the show has a problem. And again, this is another show where I'm like, I'll probably keep watching, but through a intersectional feminist minded lens, I cannot recommend it.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of shows we just talked about, guys. Did you enjoy our discussions? Agree? Disagree? Watching something new because we recommended it? Let us know in the comments. Or even tell your friends. Say, hey, I learned about all this great new anime from this really cool podcast. If you do so, would you consider please donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/animefeminist. We have 3 tiers, starting with just $1 a month, which gets you monthly site updates and staff recommendations. Our $5 tier gets you access to our Discord and bonus podcasts. We also have a store, animefeminist.com/store. Our logo is amazing. And if you want to learn more on Anime Feminist, you can find links to all of our socials. We're also out on Tumblr at Anime Feminist, Mastodon at Anime Feminist. I believe we have a co-host now at Anime Feminist, or a Blue Sky at Anime Feminist. We no longer use Twitter. That site's just become too much of a toxic waste dump. So, that's it. Thanks for enjoying our show. It's so cold outside, guys. Stay warm.